Hello everyone, I'm Crash, this is RTA Motorsports, and back there you can see Assetto Corsa Competizione. We're going to discuss our first account of this title. You can see I still got some sweat on the brow there as we just got off the rig from our live stream. And I'm going to have the live stream in the description below if you want to check that out. But as of now, we have a lot to talk about. Here we go.
Welcome to RTA Motorsports.
So if you want to see some horrible driving, definitely check out that video in the description and enjoy. The driving was pretty horrible, but a lot of that is due to we're not used to racing on a screen. We always race in VR here at RTA Motorsports, so VR is going to come next month, and then hopefully we'll get that driving back up. But there's some other aspects that we're going to discuss first. So let's first go over what Assetto Corsa Competizione is and what they're doing right now. If you're unfamiliar, it's an early access title. We have access to just the Nürburgring GP circuit, as well as we have only access to the Lamborghini Huracan GT3 at the moment. It's basically just honing in on that Blancpain GT series. You're not going to get any sort of classic F1 cars. You're not going to get any F1 content. You're not going to get any normal road cars in this title. This title is specifically Blancpain GT. So I was kind of thinking it was going to be like an Assetto Corsa 2, and it's really became sort of a GT3 based title, which is interesting, and I love GT3, so I have no problems with it. But if you're looking for, you know, hopefully racing that legendary F1 car of years past, I don't think that's going to be this title here, so you may have to still race your Assetto Corsa in that aspect. Also, they're doing an early release. Like I said, we only have access to one car and one track, so they're following kind of like what Dirt Rally did, and Dirt Rally really engraved itself into my heart because through the development process, they used the public for their development information, and it really molded that into one of my favorite rally titles of all time. So hopefully, using sort of public information here, they could sort of mold this into one of the greatest GT3 titles of all time. I'm kind of hoping so. Through their media, they said join the development. So hopefully they really take our information into account of developing this title here. But they do have a very clear and straight to the point plan that you could go on their website and you could see their calendar of release dates and what they're going to be releasing each date. So it's pretty neat that you could jump in right now at a 35% price discount and still be able to count on certain dates for release, or you could jump in at any specific point as the price is going to increase as the year progresses until their full 1.0 release. But at the moment, they are using their Unreal Engine 4 graphics engine. We're going to go over the visual aspect of what I thought. Now, when I first sat down, turned on the title, I do got to say the menu system is beautiful. It's very clear to move around. It's very easy to move around. It's very different than what you experience in Assetto Corsa, but everything is laid out in a way that seems very logical. I did like that it automatically mapped my wheel. You know, automatically mapped everything there. I didn't have to go through and sort of, you know, remap buttons or anything like that, although in the future I would imagine you could do so very easily, but I didn't have to do any of that. And I didn't even have to go through and calibrate my wheel. Although someone live chat did say they had to calibrate their wheel, we didn't. When we jumped in, all the buttons were mapped. I just wish that per wheel, depending on what wheel that you have, they already have a layout already set for each wheel type. For instance, we have the Fanatec McLaren GT3 wheel on. They already had a layout preset for it. I wish there was just a simple picture of my wheel that showed each button and what they pre-mapped it for. Because going through the menus and saying, like, number 23 is mapped for this, number 7 is mapped for this, I don't know what number 23 is. And so I would probably have to go through and remap that whole wheel anyway, which kind of defeats the purpose of having a wheel pre-mapped. So if they could show like a template, just a simple picture of the wheel and showing where all the buttons are and what they're mapped to, that would be amazing. But the menus they're very clear and concise. Otherwise, you could kind of see what you need and change anything you need there. We were able to set up a quick race, as well as we were able to go into special events very easily. Now, the types of races that are available to us right now is you have a practice, you have a quick race, and you have special events. You have, I think it's 3 or 4 different types of special events you could jump into. Gives you a description on each one, what the special event is. Some of them incorporate AI, or if you go to quick race, of course you're going to be racing against AI. Now, very important to note, although we only have access to the Lamborghini Huracan GT3, when you race against AI, you have other cars on the track. So it's not just a full field of Lamborghinis, which I was afraid of. You actually have Audis and whatnot on there. So it's very nice to see that they incorporated the other cars on the track, so you still feel like you're racing in a, you know, a full release title, even though we have access only to one car. When I first jumped in though, and we started racing, the first thing that occurred to me was everything is very crisp looking. Everything looks really good. The inclement weather conditions are beautiful and gorgeous. Sunsets are really gorgeous, how the light kind of comes through the trees and the rays of the sun hit your windshield. But I do gotta say, the color, the saturation on its default setting is just too high. Everything looks very vibrant. It's almost like in home theater, if you put your TV or your projector on vibrant setting, it's a little bit too much of a color saturation push. That's where we're at here. It's just a little bit too much, and it kind of makes the cars look a little cartoony instead of a little bit more simulator-like, a little bit more realistic. But in the video settings, should be noted, you could adjust the color saturation. You don't have to leave it where it is, but on its default setting, to me, I felt like it was a little too high, and I'm going to have to adjust it. It'll be interesting to see how that translates to VR, because next month, October 10th, in that release, we're going to get VR support, as well as we're going to get the Bentley Continental GT3. You know, I'm not really sure how it's going to look in VR until we get to that point yet. But right now, that was the only negative that I could say, is that the color saturation is too high on its base setting. Otherwise, I do got to say, the title looked gorgeous. Motion blur is automatically set on, so you could disable that, which we did. And I did notice it was a lot easier to race with the title. The motion blur is a little bit strong, and it was a little bit distracting when I was racing with it on. The other thing I did not like, and I understand why they did it, but maybe there should be a toggle on and off. Now, we're using a GTX 1080 Ti, so it's not a weak card. It's a very strong card at that. But the rear mirror that's automatically set on has a mosaic pattern, and it's it's weird looking. It's very distracting to me, at least. I know it's meant to just basically lower the rendering quality of the rear mirror, so that way you could get more performance out of your race. And you don't really stare at the rear mirror for any extended period of time when you're racing. You just kind of look real quick to see where the cars are moving, whether they're trying to get you on the inside or the outside and whatnot. But the mosaic pattern is so strong that it's almost hard to tell what type of car is behind you when you look real fast. So I find myself staring a little longer than I have to, you know, when I look up, and it's a little bit distracting. I'm sure I would get used to it, but it's a little too much at the moment, and I found that I'm automatically staring at it longer than I have to, just because I'm trying to figure out what type of car it is. But overall, I don't feel that the average person's going to have too much of an issue with that. But otherwise, I would say the title looks absolutely gorgeous. The rain effect is really good, how the rain hits the windshield and puddles up on the windshield. When you're racing around the track, I didn't really notice the rain puddling up around the track too much. Or in any sort of areas. Now, maybe dynamic track is coming, but also I didn't notice, from us racing around the track around some turns, I didn't notice any areas drying up or anything like that. Granted, we only raced about 10 to 12 minutes on a specific session with rain, but I didn't really notice that occurring at all. Whereas in Project Cars 2, you would kind of start to see where you're cutting into a track where a track is starting to dry up, and you would start to see puddling of rain. Some areas on a track. I did see puddles off the track, like in the sand pits and stuff like that, but they seem to be stagnant as far as like not growing or shrinking or anything like that with the weather. So I'm not sure if that's coming at all. I'm going to have to look at their release notes further down the line, or maybe it's occurring right now, but it's just occurring at a much slower rate than I was expecting. But that's something that I didn't notice as well. But the one thing that was very beautiful is if you're racing in sunset, as you're coming around one of the turns, you could kind of see the sun kind of drop below the height of the trees. And as the sun is cutting through the trees, it's absolutely gorgeous. And then it kind of shines on your windshield, and just it really looks really realistic in that sense, and that was very beautiful to watch. Now, if you watch the live stream, you're going to notice that we had our motion rig going. We're using the Prosimu T1000 3 degrees of freedom motion rig, and it was fully functional, and that's because we're using SimTools and their professional license, and they just released a patch, I think it was yesterday or today. So we were able to use our motion rig as well and kind of get a feel for the telemetry data that's coming from ACC into our SimTools. And I do got to say it was pretty flawless. I did have to bump the gain up. Almost every other title I'm running at 65-70. I did have to bump this up to 85. I'm not sure if that's the title or if that's the way they created the patch. There was also less information coming through as far as, you know, whenever I'm shifting the car or anything like that. In other titles with the Lamborghini Huracan or like the Porsche 911 RSR or anything like that, when you shift the car, you kind of feel it in the rig. The whole rig kind of jumps for a second. I didn't really get that in this. I got a lot of just road telemetry data and G-force data. Not so much in the aspect of the car shifting. So I don't know if that's telemetry data coming from ACC being missed or if that's just the way they developed the patch. Can't really say there. The biggest issue that I'm running into right now, and again, we're early access, is it's pretty hard to control the car in a slide. I found that whenever I started losing the car, there was a defined line of, all right, we kind of slid the car a little bit and then just lost it. And whenever you lose a car, I found it very hard to save the car at that point. Now, there was a few people in chat that kind of said the same thing. As soon as they start sliding, they almost can't catch the car at all. And it cost us quite a few races as far as, you know, when we were doing our live stream, whenever we slid or if we went in the sand pit or anything like that, you just had to wait for the car to stop before you could go back on track. There was no saving it, unfortunately. When you're on track and you're driving and you got the car hooked on the track and the tires are warmed up, I do got to say that the car felt really good. The force feedback felt good. You didn't have a lot of that fine detail of like you could feel cracks in the road almost. But the force feedback was strong. I was surprised how strong it felt. And it felt good. I could feel like I knew what the car was doing. There wasn't a ton of small detail there, but you know, I haven't really driven a GT3 car, so I'm not sure if that's actually realistic to feel all that small detail. But I didn't feel a lot of that little small road detail out there that you would feel in like normal Assetto Corsa or R Factor 2 or anything like that. So it's kind of hard to say that if this is more realistic or not, but I do got to say I still really enjoyed the force feedback. I enjoy stronger force feedback, so I enjoyed the way it felt, but just a little bit of detail kind of felt like it was missing a little bit. The rear end, I could tell when the rear end was starting to lose it. One thing that was very neat and very nice to see was that they give you a nice graph of the tire data. And whenever you started, you had your brake and your tire data. You could see the inside wall, the mid tread, and the outside wall of each tire and how they were warming up. And there was a big difference between the tires being cold and the brakes being cold compared to when the tires were warm and the brakes were warm. There was a huge difference in how the car handled and how you were able to brake and everything like that. And it was very neat to see, and you could see it very clearly in graphical data there. When the tires were heated up, how they were heating up, and also if you slid the car off the track like we did quite a few times, you could actually see that some of the rear tires were being overheated, and it was very clear in graphical data where they were being overheated, how much they were being overheated in certain areas of the tire, and you notice that you would lose traction or you would lose the ability to basically hook a turn a way that you should be able to, because those tires were overheated. So it was interesting to see. It kind of added to the challenge and maybe, you know, definitely added to the realism of it. And it's going to be interesting to see as time progresses how this translates into a full title. So overall, right now, I'm really enjoying this title. It's a challenge to try to race it on a screen, coming from constantly racing it in VR, but it's important to note we are going to get VR support next month. So that's going to be really, really cool. Overall, I'm very excited with what Kunos is doing here, and I'm very impressed with it. completely. And I know that there's going to be a lot of changes as time progresses because they are listening to what we're saying, or hopefully they are listening to what we're saying. So everything I'm saying here may just not even be an issue as the future comes along. But overall, our first race, our first experience in ACC is a promising one. And if you have any questions or any comments, definitely leave them in the comment box below if I missed anything. So as usual, I'm Crash RTA Motorsports. Definitely subscribe, hit that like button, helps us out big time. And we'll see you all in the next one. Have a good one.